My husband of 3 years, Harrison, was cheating on me. And with whom? My father's illegitimate daughter. He let her humiliate me, even helped her steal my family's fortune. Finally, I let him go, withdrew all my love, and then he lost it. A reminder that this story is a one-shot. It took a lot of work to create, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, here we go. Rocky handed me the divorce papers while I was making dinner. Beef stew was simmering on the stove, his favorite. I was so happy, anticipating the look on his face when he tasted it. Seeing the divorce papers, my hand faltered. The knife tip grazed the paper, and a string of blood welled up. My husband of 3 years, the man I loved deeply, acted as if he didn't notice. His voice was cold. I never loved you, Stella. Ethan is the love of my life. Ethan snuggled into his arms, the smug look on his face unmistakable. Stella, Rocky doesn't love you. Clinging to him won't change anything. I didn't answer. I just stared at Rocky, dumbfounded. I had fallen for him at first sight, chased him for 5 years, and we'd been married for 3. I used my entire dowry and all my energy to help him start his company, to make it successful. 8 years, and I still couldn't warm his heart. Rocky, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as if I couldn't believe it myself. Are you really divorcing me? A flicker of disgust, barely perceptible, crossed his face. Ha! You think I'm joking? You know why I married you. He paused, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Marrying you was the biggest regret of my life. The pain in my chest was suffocating. Ethan scoffed, reaching up to loop his arms around Rocky's neck. Stella, desperate women are the least valuable, didn't you know? Rocky hated being touched. In 3 years of marriage, we could count the number of times we'd held hands on one hand. Yet here he was, letting this illegitimate child all over him. My hands started shaking violently. It was summer, but I felt like I was plunged into icy water. Rocky, 8 years. Did you never love me, not even a little? He looked down at me like I was a stranger. No. Something inside me shattered. I picked up a pen, my hand trembling as I signed my name on the divorce papers. Yay, Rocky. Now we can be together, officially, Ethan said, deliberately loud enough for me to hear. He planted a kiss on Rocky's lips. Rocky's expression was indulgent, and he playfully nudged Ethan's nose. More kisses later, Ethan said with a suggestive smile, looking at me with the triumphant smirk of a victor. Okay, Rocky, let's go. There's an outsider here. Just looking at her makes me sick. Rocky didn't glance at me again. He put his arm around Ethan and walked away without looking back. I collapsed on the floor, feeling drained of all strength. 8 years of devotion, 3 years of marriage. It all seemed so ridiculous. The memory of Rocky's heartless face sent waves of pain through me. I don't remember how I fell asleep, only that I cried myself to sleep, soaking my pillow with tears. I woke up again to the jarring sound of my phone. Rocky's name flashed on the screen, and a fresh wave of pain washed over me. My hand trembled as I answered. Rocky, I croaked, my voice thick with unshed tears. Before I could say another word, Ethan cut me off. Still hung up on my Rocky, dear sister? Even through the phone, his smugness was palpable. Well, prepare to be disappointed. Rocky doesn't want to talk to you. He asked me to call and tell you that the very sight of the house you shared makes him sick. So, consider it yours. A sharp pang of pain shot through my stomach, and I doubled over. Ethan's words were the final straw, crushing the last flicker of hope within me. Rocky doesn't want anything to do with you, but I couldn't bear the thought of his things staying in your house. So, I'm here to retrieve them. He hung up before I could respond. I tossed the phone aside, staring blankly at the ceiling. The dial tone echoed the emptiness in my heart. He loathed me so much that even the house we shared for 3 years disgusted him. After some time, a harsh knocking startled me. I knew it was Ethan. The thought of him stripping away every trace of Rocky's presence filled me with a primal resistance. I didn't want to open the door, but he got in anyway, using Rocky's key. I managed to make my way downstairs, gripping the wall for support. Ethan stood there, arms crossed, looking down at me. "Just here to collect Rocky's things, sis. Hope you don't mind me intruding," he smirked. "Not that it matters if you do. The house is in Rocky's name, after all." He gestured to the two movers behind him, and they began emptying the house. "This sofa?" Rocky sat on it. "It's Rocky's. Take it." "That table?" Rocky picked it out. "Take it too." Ethan, radiating triumph, directed the movers as they systematically stripped the house bare. I wanted to stop them, but I felt utterly powerless. Watching our home, the place where Rocky and I had built a life together, being dismantled piece by piece, left me feeling hollowed out. Deep down, I knew I could never truly hold on to Rocky. He only married me because I could save his mother. Now that my mother-in-law, the only person who ever showed me kindness, was gone, he no longer felt bound by his promise. Ethan, in his expensive shoes, click-clacked over to me, looking down with a condescending air. "Well, sis, I've cleared the place out. Hope you don't mind." He covered his mouth with a feigned gasp. "Oh, but it doesn't matter if you do, does it? Rocky doesn't want to hear from you anyway." I straightened up, clinging to the wall for support. "Right," I said, looking at him, but really speaking to myself. "It's time I went back to my own place." Ethan, my father's illegitimate child, barred from our family, flinched at my words. A flicker of malice crossed his face. His eyes darted to my hand. "You and Rocky are divorced now. No need to keep wearing that ring. Such a beautiful piece. Don't throw it away. Give it to me. After all, Rocky and I are getting married." I instinctively tried to pull my hand back, but he was quicker, grabbing it and removing the ring. It was beautiful, a custom design I'd spent 3 months perfecting. I thought our love would be as eternal as the ring's name, but after just 3 years, both the ring and he were in Ethan's possession. In that moment, I knew I had to let go. Back at the family home, my best friend Sophie heard about the divorce and invited me out to lift my spirits. Seeing I was down, she tried to cheer me up. "Star, you're divorced now, so stop dwelling on it. We're here to have fun, so let it go and enjoy yourself." I sighed. She was right. I'd made my decision, so there was no point wallowing in the past. Sophie took me to all the places Harrison never had. Her company really helped, and I felt much better. That evening, she led me to a fancy restaurant. Beaming, she announced, "This place is impossible to get into. I started queuing online yesterday and finally snagged a table." But I couldn't focus on what she was saying. At the table behind her sat Harrison, Ethan, and my dad, having dinner together. Ethan was acting like a spoiled child, clinging to the 2 men I loved most. I'd always thought Dad was so serious, but it turned out he saved all his smiles for his illegitimate daughter. A wave of nausea washed over me. I turned to Sophie and pulled her towards the exit. Ethan spotted me. "Stella, you're here too? What a coincidence." Only then did the 2 men seem to notice me, looking up in surprise. Harrison, assuming I was following him, gave me a look of disgust. Dad, on the other hand, looked panicked. "Star, what are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Ethan chirped, "Well, we're practically sisters. Since you're here, why don't you join us?" She added with a saccharine smile, "You're so fond of Rocky, I'm sure you'd love to have dinner with him." I clenched my jaw, about to retort, when Sophie put a hand on my shoulder, stopping me. She strode over and slapped Ethan across the face. "How dare you speak to Star like that? You're nothing but a homewrecker. You have no right." Ethan, clearly not expecting to be hit, burst into tears and threw herself into Harrison's arms. "Dad, Rocky, she hit me." Harrison's face darkened at the sight of his beloved crying. He stood up, walked over to me, and slapped me. "Control your friend. You can't lay a hand on Ethan." I froze, completely speechless. Sophie and Ethan argued, but I just stood there, hand over my cheek, unable to make a sound. My cheek stung. I looked up at my dad, hoping to see a flicker of sympathy, but there was none. He just stared at me with impatience, as if the person who'd just been slapped in public wasn't his daughter, but a complete stranger. "Can you please not cause trouble for me? There are so many people watching. Can you at least save me some face?" My dad, after I'd been humiliated, was more concerned about his own embarrassment. A wave of bitterness washed over me. Sophie, in the midst of the scuffle, was about to get physical with Harrison and Ethan. Worried she'd get hurt, I quickly pulled her away. "Snow, let's not argue with them. Let's just go." Outside the restaurant, Sophie was furious. "Star, you're the legitimate heiress of the Sterling family. You can't let that illegitimate brat walk all over you. I recorded everything. Send it to your brother. We can't just let this go." I nodded. She was right. I couldn't keep giving in. My dad married into the family, so he had no real power in our company. My brother Ethan, however, with his exceptional abilities, had gradually earned my mom's trust over the years. He was livid when he heard I'd been slapped and wanted to rush over immediately. Hearing the anxiety in his voice, I realized there were still people who cared about me. Why should I keep letting those who didn't matter get to me? I was the Sterling family's most accomplished daughter, a top graduate, a childhood prodigy. If I really wanted to fight, Ethan wouldn't stand a chance. "Ethan," I said, "we need to think this through. I know what kind of person Ethan is. He wants more than just my husband." My brother caught on quickly. With just a few words, a plan began to form. A few days later, a grand party was thrown for my return as the Sterling heiress. Almost everyone in the city's elite was invited. I deliberately leaked information about the dress I was going to wear. As expected, I heard the next day that Ethan had ordered a similar one. My dad was unremarkable. My brother and I inherited our mother's beauty. Ethan, lacking such a stunning mother, was quite plain. During my 3-year marriage to Harrison, I'd exhausted myself catering to him, boosting his confidence to the point where he thought he was better than me in every way. Now that I was back with the Sterlings, I wasn't going to put up with that anymore. I arrived at the party fashionably late. As I descended the grand staircase, I saw Ethan surrounded by a crowd. Over the past few days, my brother had pretended to return company shares to my dad. My mom had also conveniently fallen ill and been hospitalized. Seeing his lifelong dream within reach, my usually cautious father let his guard down. He brought Ethan to the party, a world far above their station, and announced her as the Sterling family's prize daughter. But what my dad didn't know was that they'd already lost. From the very beginning. I glided down the staircase, the diamonds in my heels clicking against the marble. All eyes turned upwards, and as they landed on me, the room fell silent. Yes, I had come to set the record straight. Ethan was the first to react, his champagne flute clattering to the floor, a splash of crimson staining the marble. "You," he stammered, his face a mask of disbelief. Beside him, Harrison's eyes flickered with a hint of admiration, his hand instinctively releasing Ethan's. Ethan, normally so self-assured, now looked pale, and his gaze, directed at me, was icy. He had planned to outshine me at this gala, but I, it seemed, wore the dress far better. During my time away from the family, I had dedicated myself to self-care, my skin regaining its former radiance. Tonight, my auburn curls cascaded freely, unadorned, the scarlet gown clinging to my figure, every movement exuding the effortless grace of an heiress. In contrast, Ethan, dripping in expensive jewelry, looked gaudy and contrived. A former business associate recognized me and approached with a compliment. "It's been 3 years, Miss Stella, but your elegance remains unmatched." His words confirmed what everyone was now realizing, who the real Miss Stella was. The crowd that had surrounded Ethan now flocked to me. Basking in their admiration, I raised my glass, my eyes finding Ethan's. As I predicted, he couldn't contain himself. He lunged forward, reaching for my hair. "We're both Stella's daughters. What makes you so special? You've had the family's love for over 20 years, isn't that enough?" The love child, so predictable. I didn't even need to speak, he was falling right into my trap. Inwardly, I smirked, but outwardly, I feigned surprise. Everyone in New York knows there's only one Stella. Are you mistaken? You can't just go around saying things like that. The mention of a potential scandal hushed the room. Everyone watched, eager to see Ethan's downfall. Oblivious, he continued his tirade. "There's only officially one Stella," he sneered, folding his arms. "You may have played the part for 20 years, but Dad's love has always belonged to me. You're nothing but a charity case, starved for affection." He practically shouted it, ensuring everyone knew his claim. And then my father, blinded by his newfound paternal pride, stepped forward to defend his daughter. "Rocky is my daughter. She's suffered for years, and it's time she took her rightful place in the family." "Dad," I choked out, squeezing my thigh hard enough to produce a few tears. "What are you saying? You and Mom have such a strong marriage. How could there be another daughter? I've always seen you as the best father in the world. How could you?" My voice trailed off. I swayed, feigning a faint, collapsing dramatically to the floor. Even the most composed members of New York society couldn't help but gasp at this shocking turn of events. The Stella family had always been the epitome of old money in New York. A scandal of this magnitude naturally became the talk of the town. I understood this, but they clearly didn't. Right at that moment, my brother, Harrison, arrived. Though young, he'd already carved out an unparalleled position in the business world. Add to that his status as a Manhattan golden boy, and he naturally commanded attention. He immediately escorted me onto the stage and formally announced to everyone that the Stellas had only one daughter, and that was me, Stella. After the gala incident, my mother stripped my father of his sole remaining position in the company. He quieted down for a while. Ethan, as expected, made a scene at the Stella mansion. He burst through the door while my father was dutifully massaging my mother's shoulders. Seeing him, Ethan's eyes immediately welled up. In a choked voice, he cried, "Dad, have you abandoned me? You haven't come to see me for a week. Do you know what kind of week I've had?" My father paled at the sight of him, but hearing his precious daughter speak like that, his face quickly softened with concern. However, noticing my mother's darkening expression, he retained a shred of sanity. "Ethan, don't make a fuss. This isn't where you belong." "Why doesn't this belong to me? I'm a Stella too. Why can't I live here?" "Insolent!" My mother's face was thunderous. What kind of bastard dares to call themselves a Stella? My mother's outburst reduced Ethan to tears. "How dare you call me a bastard? This is my father's house. You're just a woman. My dad can replace you any time he wants." My mother nearly fainted, her face ashen with rage. I rushed to her side, supporting her and trying to calm her down. "Just an ignorant little love child. He doesn't understand how power works in the Stella family. Why bother arguing with him?" Leaning on my shoulder, my mother addressed my father. "Ethan, you better control your bastard daughter. If I see her prancing around in front of me again, you know the consequences." "Dad." Ethan looked at my father in disbelief. He clearly believed his father, the head of Stella Corp., was all-powerful. Reality, however, was a harsh slap in the face. perhaps unwilling to lose face in front of his beloved daughter, and because this whole situation was a sore spot for him, my father unusually snapped at my mother. "Claire, enough is enough. Your daughter is a Stella, so why can't mine be? I'm telling you, Ethan is moving into the Stella mansion today." My mother started coughing uncontrollably from the stress. I tried to soothe her. Just then, Harrison returned, accompanied by another young man. "I've never heard someone so brazen about an affair," the young man with vibrant green curls said before Harrison could even speak. His striking emerald eyes ignored everyone else in the room, locking directly onto mine. My brother, Ethan, glared at Harrison with undisguised disgust. "I gave you a break at the last gala, but I see you have the audacity to show your face again. Your boyfriend's company is under my control now. If you want to keep him afloat, stay away from my sister and mother." His icy stare silenced Harrison completely. Then he turned to our father. "And you," he said, "if you're not going to behave yourself while Dawn's father is in town, you can choose to leave with nothing." Having enjoyed a life of luxury, our father was naturally unwilling to give up the family fortune. He clearly knew whether his own comfort or his daughter's life was more important. Harrison, however, couldn't accept this. He yelled and screamed, refusing to leave the house. Security had to be called to drag him out. I sat on the sofa, sipping my tea, watching the whole scene unfold with indifference. A man with curly auburn hair approached me. "I'm Dawn," he said. "You're Stella, right? Your brother has mentioned you." I knew Dawn was the eldest son of the influential Hayes family, but I hadn't realized how handsome he was. "Hello," I replied with a polite smile. "There's a party next week. I was wondering if you'd be free to attend." Now that I was back in the family fold, I wasn't about to pass up opportunities to network. I agreed without hesitation. Dawn seemed pleased. "Great. I'll pick you up then." The party arrived as scheduled. When I arrived with Dawn, most of the guests were already there. With Dawn's introductions, I navigated the social scene with ease, making several valuable connections. But then, in the corner, I spotted a familiar figure, Rocky. He was surrounded by a gaggle of flamboyantly dressed Hayes heiresses, being pressured to drink shot after shot. My gaze lingered on him for a second before I turned back to continue my conversation with Dawn. But Rocky had seen me. He broke free from the heiresses and stumbled towards me. "Star," he said. I could feel his intense gaze burning into my back. When I ignored him, he moved in front of me, staring directly at me. "Star, it's me." I had no desire to speak to him and was about to turn away when Dawn spoke. "Who are you? I don't recall your name being on the guest list. How did you get in?" His voice was laced with frost, and he looked at Rocky like he was a rat. Rocky frowned, ignoring Dawn's question and continuing to stare at me. I knew why he was here. It was all about Harrison. Now that my father had abandoned Harrison, his life was undoubtedly difficult, and Rocky, who loved him so much, couldn't bear to see him suffer. "Don't bother with Ethan," Harrison said, his voice dripping with disdain. He looked at me as if I were still the same Stella, hopelessly devoted to him. "No matter what you do, I'll never fall for you. Leave Ethan alone." Hearing him say that made my stomach churn. I gave a dismissive laugh. "Excuse me," I said coolly. "I don't know you." Seeing my reaction, Dawn didn't hold back. He had security escort Harrison out. As they dragged him away, Harrison stared at me in disbelief. "Stella, what do you mean?" I didn't even glance his way. After that, Dawn started showing up everywhere. He'd come to Claire's company while I was working, and on weekends he'd invite me out. He wasn't boring, thankfully, and I found his company relaxing, so I didn't refuse. One day, while we were shopping, we ran into Ethan and Harrison. Thanks to some strategic moves by my brother at the company, Harrison was on the verge of bankruptcy. They both looked rough, especially Harrison. With his scruffy beard, he looked 10 years older. Seeing me with Dawn, Ethan, who'd seemed listless a moment before, suddenly became agitated. "I knew you were no good," he exclaimed. "It hasn't even been that long since the divorce, and you're already with some other high roller." I was stunned by his audacity. He and Harrison were the ones who cheated, yet he had the nerve to criticize me. "Well, it's still better than cheating within the marriage like Harrison and being a homewrecker like you," I retorted. Ethan's face turned red with rage. He pointed at me, arms crossed, and started yelling, reminding me of my former mother-in-law. "You gold-digging little." "Don't think just because your mommy's got your back I'm afraid to call you out. You're nothing but a cuckoo, stealing someone else's nest, and now you're gallivanting around with other men. You're such a tramp." I was used to his lack of class, but Dawn wasn't having it. "He doesn't just have his mother backing him up," Dawn said, his voice icy. "He has me and the entire Dubois family. And you? What do you have? Your deadbeat live-in father-in-law? And you, a mere love child, dare to question the legitimate daughter?" The Dubois family was prominent nationwide, their status rivaling the Smiths. Ethan couldn't possibly be unaware of them. Hearing Dawn's words, Ethan realized he was the Dubois heir. Looking at Dawn's designer clothes and handsome face, he gritted his teeth, his face a mask of resentment. "You're the Dubois heir, aren't you? Are you really okay being someone's rebound? This woman's been married before. She's used goods. Why are you so eager to be with her?" His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I instinctively clenched my fists. Yes, I had been married. Even though Harrison had never touched me, the fact remained. What would Dawn say? He'd been so kind to me, but if he knew I was divorced, what would he think? To my surprise, Dawn didn't seem to care. He quietly took my hand and said to Ethan, "This is the 21st century. Why are you still living in the 18th? The woman I choose is naturally the best woman in the world. It's you, inside and out, who's repulsive. And it's me who's been pursuing Star. It's just, she hasn't agreed to be with me yet." Ethan clearly wanted to say more, but Harrison stopped him. "Ethan, stop it." He then ignored Ethan, looked up at me and said, "Star, do you know? That day after you said you didn't know me, my heart suddenly ached. I remembered all the moments we shared and suddenly realized you'd already become a part of my life. I regret it now, regret not holding on to you tighter." His words made my skin crawl. Ethan, strong and resolute, slapped Harrison hard. "How did you beg me to be with you back then? Now that she's doing well, you want to crawl back? You wish." Harrison became agitated. "Star has always been the one in my heart. If you hadn't seduced me, how could I have divorced her? You know why you divorced her. The way you treated her, no woman would stay with you." Hearing this, Harrison lost control and slapped Ethan back. Ethan didn't back down, and they quickly started brawling. I thoughtfully called the police for them, then grabbed Dawn's hand and left without looking back. My dad, recently bewildered, reinstated the CEO position at the company. Thinking of Ethan's greedy demeanor, I reminded my brother to keep a close eye on Dad. After hanging up, I continued with my work. Soon, the HR manager came to show me the new hires. Normally, such a trivial matter wouldn't require my personal attention, but I'd become accustomed to being hands-on, partly to protect my dad. As I looked through the files, a woman named Erica caught my eye. For no other reason than she had the exact same face as Ethan, clearly a tactic my dad used to sneak Ethan back into the company. I knew this was her final counterattack, but it also gave me a legitimate reason to clear out anyone who didn't belong in the family business. I pretended not to notice and secretly had someone watch Ethan. A month later, she made her move. She landed several multi-million-dollar contracts and shone brightly at the press conference. For a time, Ethan was the star of the company. Just then, a rumor started, who knows how, that Ethan was the long-lost daughter of the family. Ethan didn't deny it, and officially changed her name back. Somehow, my dad managed to convince even the old shareholders of her legitimacy. As the rumors spiraled out of control, even my mom, who was on vacation in France, couldn't help but call and ask what was going on. While I let the situation escalate, I even tolerated Ethan's repeated disrespectful behavior towards me at important events. Soon, Ethan wasn't satisfied with these petty squabbles. At the end of the month, a scandal about the Sterling family of New York City quickly brewed online. News reports claimed the Sterlings had not one, but 2 daughters, one of whom had been raised elsewhere due to certain circumstances. In trending hashtags, Ethan portrayed me as a spoiled, entitled brat, married, disrespectful, uneducated, and incredibly ambitious. He, on the other hand, was painted as the innocent, pitiful victim, ostracized and misunderstood. Don, seeing the trending topics, immediately rushed to my office. When he arrived, I was still calmly working through some paperwork. "Star, just say the word and I'll take care of this immediately," he said, sitting in the chair opposite my desk, a hint of anxiety in his voice. I stood up and poured him a steaming cup of tea. "No need. If you want to help, buy some more trending hashtags. I'm worried this isn't blowing up enough." Seeing my serious expression, Don realized I wasn't joking and nodded. "Anything you need, just tell me. I'll always be on your side." With my deliberate manipulation, the public outcry intensified. Sterling Corp's stock plummeted, and protesters with banners condemning me constantly picketed outside the company headquarters. My car, even my home address, were exposed and vandalized with spray paint. 3 days later, Ethan, as usual, played the victim online, fishing for sympathy. But the Sterling Corp official account, which had remained silent, suddenly posted a tweet. No sob stories, no clarifications. The tweet contained only documents, page after page. The public finally saw the truth. Every contract Ethan had negotiated was fabricated. The shareholders who had praised her were simply paid off by my father. Even the speech that had propelled her into the spotlight was ghostwritten. Immediately after, I posted a video on my personal account. In it, I sincerely told my story, exposing Ethan as my father's illegitimate daughter. I also apologized to everyone for taking up public resources. Public opinion completely reversed. Ethan desperately tried to win back her followers, but the evidence was irrefutable. People weren't fools to be repeatedly deceived. Capitalizing on the renewed interest, I promoted Sterling Corp's new product. Its innovative design and practical functions quickly attracted consumers, many of whom already felt a pang of guilt. Sterling Corp's stock soared overnight, exceeding its previous value. My father was ousted from Sterling Corp, and my mother divorced him. Thanks to a prenuptial agreement, he didn't get a penny. I firmly took my rightful place as CEO of Sterling Corp. On the day of my promotion, Ethan and my father intercepted me outside the company. Ethan's hair was disheveled, her face contorted with rage. "Are you satisfied? Now I have nothing. Are you satisfied?" I waved off the approaching security guard, pushed my sunglasses up and looked at him coldly. "You never had anything. It was all just wishful thinking. Why, just because we're both daughters of our father, do you get to hog the position of heiress while I have to scrape by as the chauffeur's daughter, watching you enjoy a perfect family life? Because you're mistaken." I reminded him, "This family fortune belongs to my mother, not your father. If you hadn't been so obsessed with possessing what isn't yours, you might have lived a comfortable life under my father's protection. Your mistake was being too greedy." "Greedy?" Ethan suddenly burst out laughing. "Yes, I'm greedy, but I'm also envious. Envious that you were pampered growing up. Envious that even after your divorce, you could still find such a successful man. Everything you get in life, you have to have the strength to hold on to. My success isn't just down to good luck, I sighed. It's a shame you haven't figured that out yet. I left them without another word and walked into the building. Ethan and my father were quickly convicted. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. People pushed to the edge are capable of anything. I was walking home from work one evening with the unsettling feeling that I was being followed. I was about to call 911 when I was knocked unconscious. I woke up in pitch darkness, bound tightly with rope. I knew exactly who had taken me. As if to confirm my suspicions, I heard the click of high heels, followed by Ethan's voice. Even if I kill you before I go down, I won't lose out. His voice was manic. Even without seeing him, I could picture his expression. Something cold pressed against my chin, and Ethan's voice drew closer. "Just looking at your face makes me sick," he said. "It's all your fault my life is so miserable." I stayed silent. In this situation, silence was the best option. Tell me, wouldn't I be happy without you? I was going to keep playing dumb, but Ethan gripped my chin so hard I thought he'd shatter it. "Answer me. Why won't you speak?" The cold object pressed harder, and I felt my skin break, the warm trickle of blood. "Maybe," I said. "Someone like him could never be happy, even without me." But to appease him, to prevent him from doing something drastic, I had to say it. "Yes," he muttered. "All I have to do is kill you." The blade traced the line of my throat. "Stella, die!" he screamed, raising the knife and plunging it towards me. At that crucial moment, I finally managed to fray the rope binding my arms, rolled aside, and narrowly avoided the blow. "Give it up. You can't escape," Ethan said, advancing on me with the knife. Even with one arm free, the other ropes still restricted my movements. Trapped in that confined space, I was no match for him, and there was nowhere to run. Just as I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst, the door burst open, a beam of light flooding in. I heard Dawn's voice, followed by the authoritative tones of police officers. Ethan was quickly subdued, and as they dragged him towards the police car, he continued to hurl insults at me. Suddenly, someone covered my ears from behind. I turned to see Dawn. He looked at my neck with such tenderness and said, "I'm so sorry, I'm late." I threw my arms around him. "Thank you." The usually eloquent Dawn, for once, was speechless, stammering incoherently. After a moment, he regained his composure and hugged me back.